Ted Bundy is one of the most infamous and terrifying figures in the history of American crime. His name evokes feelings of horror and disbelief, yet his story continues to captivate people around the world. The tale of Bundy is more than just a recount of horrific murders. It's a chilling look at the psychology behind serial killing and the deception that made Bundy a master manipulator. Over a period of several years, Bundy claimed the lives of more than 30 women across multiple states in the U.S., and his intelligence and charm allowed him to evade capture for a long time. His story is not only one of gruesome violence, but also one of deep psychological complexity. How did such a seemingly normal, even charming, individual turn into one of the most notorious serial killers of all time? What drove Bundy to commit such brutal acts, and why was he able to hide his dark side for so long? These questions continue to haunt criminologists, psychologists, and anyone who learns about his crimes. In this in-depth exploration, we will uncover the chilling story of Ted Bundy, from his early life to his rise as one of the most dangerous killers in American history. We will look at the crimes he committed, the investigation that eventually led to his capture, and the psychological profile that has baffled experts for decades. This series aims to unravel the disturbing truth behind Bundy's calm exterior and violent nature, to understand the dark mind of a man who fooled an entire nation. Part 1. The early life of Ted Bundy. Beginning a complex childhood. Ted Bundy was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, to Eleanor Louise Caldwell. His early life, like many criminals, was marked by mystery and confusion. For most of his childhood, Bundy was led to believe that his mother was his sister and his grandparents were his parents. His real father was absent from his life, and Bundy's mother, a young woman who had been unmarried at the time of his birth, was forced to raise him alone in the early years of his life. Bundy experienced abandonment and secrecy, a theme that would follow him throughout his life. At the age of 4, Bundy moved with his mother to Tacoma, Washington, where they lived with his grandparents. Bundy's family structure was unconventional, and he would later describe this time as emotionally turbulent. Some psychologists speculate that Bundy's confusion about his paternity could have contributed to his developing feelings of rejection, inadequacy, and anger toward women, a complex dynamic that would later play out in his relationships with his victims. Though Bundy's home life was strained, he was a bright and charismatic child. In his youth, Bundy was described as quiet, intelligent, and well-mannered. He was known to be a hard-working student and showed interest in a variety of academic subjects, especially psychology. Despite his intelligence, he struggled with forming close relationships with his peers. He had few close friends and was somewhat of an outsider, though his outward charm and good looks allowed him to move through various social circles relatively unnoticed. Bundy's early relationships with women were equally complicated. His first major romantic relationship seemed to follow a pattern of brief encounters that were filled with emotional highs and lows. While Bundy was able to charm women, there were hints that he resented them, especially after a series of rejections he faced during his college years. His first serious girlfriend, Stephanie Brooks, was a young woman Bundy dated for several years, but they broke up in 1968, an event that is said to have had a profound effect on Bundy. The breakup, coupled with a sense of failure, seemed to trigger the beginning of his violent urges. As Bundy entered adulthood, his life took a more sinister turn. He moved to Utah to attend law school at Brigham Young University, where his grades were not stellar, but his intelligence and good looks continued to serve him well in social situations. During his time in Utah, Bundy became increasingly drawn to violent pornography and began developing increasingly disturbing fantasies about women. Experts have since suggested that his exposure to violent material during this period played a role in his psychological development, shaping the violent urges that would later manifest in his actions. The development of violent tendencies. As Ted Bundy's college years progressed, he became more withdrawn and fixated on violent fantasies. He was described by classmates and professors as charming, but those close to him could sense something unsettling beneath the surface. Bundy's relationship with his mother continued to be strained, as he often seemed to harbor resentment towards her and the way she raised him. His emotional instability during this time, especially after the breakup with Brooks, is believed to have triggered his growing anger and hatred towards women. Bundy's first confirmed crime took place in 1974 when a young woman named Linda Ann Healy disappeared from her apartment in Seattle, Washington. At the time, Bundy was still a law student, and no one suspected him of being involved in the disappearance. Healy's case was just one of many that would eventually be linked to Bundy, but it marked the first of what would become a terrifying pattern of abductions and murders. Healy's disappearance was followed by several other women going missing in the Pacific Northwest. All of the victims shared similar traits. They were young, attractive, and often found in similar locations, such as college campuses, parking lots, or near public places. Bundy used his charm and quick wit to gain the trust of his victims. He would often pretend to be injured or disabled, using a fake cast or crutches, to make women believe he needed help. Once they were close enough, he would overpower them and abduct them. For Bundy, the act of abducting these women seemed to fuel his sense of power and control. He would take them to secluded areas, where he would brutalize them, often sexually assaulting them before murdering them. The level of violence he inflicted on his victims was chilling, and his ability to manipulate and deceive was equally disturbing. For several months, Bundy's crimes went unnoticed, and it wasn't until 1975 that the first significant break in the case occurred: the arrest. An early investigation in August of 1975, Bundy was pulled over by a police officer in Utah while driving a car that matched the description of a vehicle linked to several abductions. The officer, who was investigating the recent disappearances of young women in the area, had Bundy's car impounded. A search of the car uncovered numerous items that would later tie Bundy to his crimes, including a ski mask and a crowbar. The discovery led to Bundy's arrest, but at this point, he was still unaware of the extent to which the authorities were linking him to the murders. As Bundy's arrest garnered media attention, more victims came forward, and detectives began to piece together the full scope of his crimes. In 1976, Bundy was formally charged with the kidnapping and murder of 2 women in Utah. However, it was during the trial in 1977 that Bundy's dark secrets began to unfold. Bundy had become known for his ability to charm the media and the courtroom, but behind his well-groomed facade was a ruthless, calculating killer. Conclusion that Bundy's early life was one of confusion, rejection, and emotional instability. He grew up in a fractured family environment, which played a significant role in shaping his psychological development. Bundy's intelligence and charm allowed him to blend into society, but his violent tendencies were always lurking beneath the surface. His early years set the stage for what would become a chilling and horrific series of murders, and it was clear that Bundy was a master of deception, capable of hiding his darkest impulses behind a facade of normalcy. As we continue to explore the life and crimes of Ted Bundy, we will dive deeper into his killing spree, his trial, and the chilling psychological elements that made him one of the most infamous serial killers in history. Part 2. The Rise of a Monster. Ted Bundy's early murders. Beginning of the killing spree. Bundy's arrest in 1975 was a significant breakthrough in a series of unsolved disappearances and murders that had plagued the Pacific Northwest and later other parts of the United States. However, it wasn't until Bundy's trial that the full extent of his horrific crimes came to light. While Bundy had been apprehended in connection with one kidnapping, it wasn't until investigators started digging deeper that they realized they had a far more monstrous figure in their custody. Bundy's first confirmed murder was that of Linda and Healy, a 21-year-old university student from Seattle, Washington, who vanished in January 1974. Her disappearance was just one of many in a series of unsettling cases involving missing women across the Pacific Northwest. At the time, no one suspected Ted Bundy, but in hindsight, it is now clear that Bundy had already started his killing spree. Healy's body was discovered a few weeks later, but Bundy's violent journey had only just begun. What set Bundy apart from many serial killers was his ability to charm those around him. His charisma allowed him to gain the trust of his victims, and often he used his charm as a weapon. Bundy would pretend to be injured, using crutches or casts to seem vulnerable and gain the sympathy of women. Once they came close enough, Bundy would overpower them, abducting them, and ultimately killing them in cold blood. His method was calculated and horrifyingly efficient, using his intellect to disarm his victims and avoid detection for a long time. The modus operandi. Bundy's modus operandi involved meticulous planning and careful execution. In many cases, he would approach women on college campuses or in public areas, pretending to need assistance. His victims were often college students, and they would be taken while they were walking alone, often in the evening when they were most vulnerable. Bundy's charm played a critical role in his ability to deceive women into trusting him. Once his victims were in his grasp, Bundy would take them to secluded areas, often in remote forests or hidden locations, where he would commit unspeakable acts of violence. In many cases, Bundy would sexually assault his victims before killing them. He would then dispose of the bodies in remote locations, leaving behind very few clues. His victims were often left in a state of disarray, with their clothes disheveled or their bodies mutilated, adding to the horror of his crimes. What made Bundy even more terrifying was his ability to adapt. He learned from each of his previous killings and refined his technique, becoming more meticulous and elusive with each murder. His ability to evade capture for such a long time speaks to his intelligence and his cunning nature. The victims, women, in the crosshairs to Bundy's killing spree stretched across multiple states, including Washington, Utah, Colorado, and Idaho. He was a predator with no boundaries, and his selection of victims seemed random, but in reality, There were specific traits that connected them all. His victims were often young women with long hair parted in the middle, a specific feature Bundy seemed to fixate on. This detail would later become part of the psychological profile that emerged after his capture. Bundy's second confirmed murder occurred in February 1974, just 1 month after Healy's disappearance. This time, the victim was 18-year-old Donna Manson, a college student from the University of Washington. Like Healy, Donna vanished while walking alone on campus. Her body, like many others, would remain missing for several months, and Bundy continued to evade the police. It wasn't until Bundy's eventual capture that the true horror of these disappearances would be revealed. Throughout 1974, several other women vanished, including 19-year-old Susan Rincourt, 18-year-old Brenda Ball, and 21-year-old Georgianne Hawkins. All of these young women had one thing in common: they were young, attractive, and seemingly vulnerable to a predator like Bundy. Their disappearances caused alarm in the public, but the police had no solid leads. Bundy's ability to stay one step ahead of law enforcement and avoid detection for so long became a defining feature of his killing spree. One of the most chilling aspects of Bundy's killings was his ability to compartmentalize his life. While he was actively abducting and killing women, Bundy maintained a facade of normalcy. He had a job, a social life, and even romantic relationships that masked his true nature. To the outside world, Bundy appeared charming, intelligent, and well-adjusted. He was able to blend into society and avoid suspicion. Even as his list of victims grew, the investigation, piecing together the puzzles, the body count continued to rise. Investigators began to realize that there was a serial killer on the loose, but the case was far from easy to solve. Bundy's methodical approach to his killings, along with his ability to manipulate the situation, made it difficult for law enforcement to catch him. His crimes seemed disconnected, and police were struggling to link the various disappearances across different states. It wasn't until Bundy was arrested in 1975 that the investigation began to take shape. His capture came after a routine traffic stop in Utah. Police had been investigating a series of suspicious events in the area, and Bundy was pulled over in a vehicle that matched the description of one seen near the scenes of recent disappearances. Inside his car, investigators found items that were later linked to the crimes, including a ski mask, handcuffs, and a crowbar. Bundy's arrest was a significant turning point, but even then, police did not immediately connect him to all of the murders. In fact, it was only after a deep dive into his past and an examination of the growing evidence that they were able to definitively link him to the string of murders across the country. The arrest and the aftermath of Bundy's arrest in 1975 came as a relief to many, but it also marked the beginning of a long legal battle. Bundy, ever the manipulator, denied all charges and maintained his innocence. He would go on to represent himself in court, a move that was highly unusual and showed his deep need for control and manipulation. Throughout the trial, Bundy continued to charm those around him, even as the evidence mounted against him. Despite Bundy's denial, the evidence was overwhelming. Investigators had found fibers, hairs, and other pieces of forensic evidence linking him to the crime scenes. Additionally, several survivors came forward with testimony that helped corroborate the police's case against him. His charm, which had once helped him lure women to their deaths, was now being used to manipulate the courtroom and the media. In 1979, Bundy was convicted of the murders of 2 women in Florida, Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman, who were killed in a brutal attack in their sorority house. Bundy's crimes in Florida were some of the most violent and shocking, and the conviction ultimately led to his sentencing to death by electric chair. As Bundy sat on death row, he continued to manipulate the system. He was granted multiple delays in his execution, and he continued to make headlines with his attempts to appeal the conviction. During this time, he also confessed to more than 30 murders, though the exact number is still unknown. His confessions were chilling, as Bundy recounted his killings with a detached and cold demeanor. Ted Bundy's psychopathy, understanding the monster. What made Ted Bundy so chilling was his ability to maintain a normal, even charming, persona while carrying out such horrific acts of violence. Experts have long debated the psychological profile of Bundy, and there are several factors that seem to have contributed to his psychopathy. Bundy displayed many characteristics of a narcissistic psychopath. He had an inflated sense of his own importance. He was able to manipulate others with ease, and he showed no remorse for his actions. Bundy was also highly intelligent, which allowed him to evade capture for so long. He used his charm and charisma to deceive both victims and law enforcement, making it almost impossible for investigators to pinpoint him as the killer early on. Many psychologists have suggested that Bundy's childhood experiences, such as the confusion about his paternity and his strained relationship with his mother, may have contributed to his psychological issues. Bundy's inability to form lasting relationships with women and his tendency to view them as objects to be dominated were likely rooted in these early experiences. Bundy's case became a textbook example of psychopathy and his ability to hide. His true nature behind a facade of normalcy became a key element in understanding serial killers. His ability to blend into society and appear charming, while simultaneously carrying out horrific crimes, made him one of the most terrifying killers in history. Conclusion of Part 2. Ted Bundy's killing spree was marked by meticulous planning, manipulative tactics, and a shocking lack of remorse. His ability to deceive and manipulate those around him, combined with his intelligence and charm, allowed him to evade capture for years. As investigators began to piece together the clues, Bundy's true nature became clear: a monster hiding in plain sight. His story is one of the most chilling in the annals of American crime, and his case continues to fascinate criminologists and psychologists alike. In the next part, we will explore Bundy's capture, trial, and the lasting impact of his crimes on the criminal justice system. We will delve into his psychological profile in greater detail and examine how his manipulation and charm helped him evade justice for so long. The haunting legacy of Ted Bundy remains one of the darkest chapters in American history, and his story is far from over. Stay tuned for more as we continue to unravel the mystery behind the monster. Part 3. The Capture, Trial, and Final Confessions of Ted Bundy. The capture of Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy's capture in 1975 came as a result of a series of fateful events that ultimately led investigators to connect him to the rapidly growing list of missing women across multiple states. Prior to his arrest, Bundy had managed to evade police for years, moving between Washington, Utah, Colorado, and Florida, committing his gruesome acts without leaving much of a trace. His cold, calculating demeanor and ability to stay one step ahead of law enforcement were central to his success at evading capture. Bundy's eventual arrest occurred in the city of Granger, Utah, in August 1975. Law enforcement had been tracking a suspect who had been linked to several missing women in the region. Bundy had attracted attention when he was seen acting suspiciously in the area, and his car was noted as a possible match to a vehicle seen near some of the crime scenes. One evening, a police officer pulled over a vehicle that fit the description of the suspect's car. Inside, the officer found several items of interest, including ski masks, handcuffs, and a crowbar, items that would later be connected to Bundy's modus operandi. At the time of his arrest, Bundy was not immediately linked to the string of murders, as the investigators only had circumstantial evidence to suggest his involvement. Nonetheless, the items found in his car were more than enough to begin an investigation into his connection to the missing women. He was taken into custody and charged with the kidnapping of Carol Derringe, a woman who had managed to escape Bundy's grasp just days before his arrest. Derringe's testimony would become one of the cornerstones of Bundy's eventual conviction, as she was able to describe her abduction in chilling detail. She had been lured into Bundy's car under the pretense that he was a police officer who needed her assistance. Once inside, he attempted to restrain her using handcuffs. Fortunately, Derringe was able to escape, running to a nearby store for help, and her bravery in the face of terror led directly to Bundy's capture. The connection to the murders, a growing case in the months following his arrest. Investigators began to connect Bundy to a string of disappearances and murders spanning several states. Initially, Bundy was only charged with the kidnapping of Carol Derringe, but as the investigation deepened, police began to realize they were dealing with a far more dangerous and prolific criminal. Bundy's name was soon linked to several unsolved murders in Washington, Utah, and Colorado. One of the most significant breakthroughs came when Bundy's vehicle was found to have traces of evidence linking him to the murders of multiple women. Tire tracks from his car matched those found at several crime scenes, and hair samples found on the victims were linked to Bundy. This evidence, combined with the accounts of survivors like Derringe, began to paint a clearer picture of the man behind the killings. At the time, Bundy was already a suspect in multiple cases, but it wasn't until detectives pieced together evidence from different jurisdictions that they were able to see the full extent of his crimes. Bundy had been moving across the country, committing murders with chilling precision, and his trail of destruction was now linked across several states. Bundy's first trial, the Utah case in 1976. Bundy's first trial took place in Utah. He was charged with the kidnapping of Carol Derringe and the attempted murder of another woman, Karen Sparks. Bundy was not represented by an attorney at the time, choosing to represent himself, a move that allowed him to exert more control over the proceedings. His decision to act as his own lawyer was not only an indication of his narcissism, but also his deep need to manipulate the situation to his advantage. Despite his legal inexperience, Bundy's charm and persuasive skills allowed him to sway the courtroom in his favor. He was able to cross-examine witnesses and make legal arguments with a degree of skill That belied his lack of formal legal training. However, as the trial progressed, Bundy's arrogance and psychological manipulation began to show cracks. His behavior in court, often disruptive and erratic, gave the prosecution a glimpse into his true nature. While the trial for the Darren's kidnapping was focused on the specifics of that crime, it became evident that Bundy was a much larger threat. The prosecution began to connect the dots between the Darren's case and other disappearances. Though it would be months before Bundy was formally charged with murder. The Florida murders, a deadly escalation in 1978, Bundy had been linked to a series of horrifying murders in Florida, which would become the focal point of his criminal activity. The murders in Florida were significantly more violent and brutal than those in the earlier stages of his spree. It was in Florida that Bundy would commit some of his most horrific crimes, culminating in the brutal killings at the Chi Omega sorority house in Tallahassee in January 1978. On the night of January 15, 1978, Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house, where he brutally attacked four women. He sexually assaulted two of the women, Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman, before killing them with a blunt object. The other two women, Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, were severely beaten but survived the attack. The brutality of these murders shocked the public and added to the growing sense of fear surrounding Bundy's reign of terror. In addition to the murders at Chi Omega, Bundy was also linked to the death of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, a young girl from Florida. Leach's body was found several weeks later, and Bundy's connection to her murder would be one of the key pieces of evidence used to convict him. The psychological profile, the making of a monster Bundy's trial, along with his behavior during his time on death row, led to a greater understanding of his psychological makeup. Bundy's personality was marked by a blend of narcissism, charm, and an overwhelming need to control others. Psychologists have long debated the roots of Bundy's psychopathy, but there is little question that he was a textbook example of a narcissistic sociopath. Bundy's need for control and power over women was central to his motivations. He would often take his victims to remote locations, where he could exert his will over them with little to no resistance. Bundy also exhibited classic signs of sadistic behavior, taking pleasure in the suffering of his victims, and using the murders as a way to assert his dominance. One of the more chilling aspects of Bundy's psychological profile was his ability to compartmentalize his life. He maintained a facade of normalcy, working in politics and even having relationships with women who were unaware of his dark nature. This dual life allowed Bundy to continue his killings without suspicion, and his charm and manipulation made him appear harmless to those around him. Bundy's final trial and execution in 1979. Bundy was tried for the murders of Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman. The trial was widely covered by the media, and Bundy's defense strategy was one of the most highly debated aspects of the case. Bundy initially represented himself in court, but was later assigned a defense attorney due to his erratic behavior. His defense strategy was to deny the murders and cast doubt on the prosecution's evidence. However, Bundy's fate was sealed when he was found guilty of the murders. He was sentenced to death, and his execution was scheduled for January 1989. While on death row, Bundy confessed to killing more than 30 women. Though the true number may never be known, his confessions, delivered in a calm and detached manner, only added to the horror of his crimes. Bundy's execution by electric chair took place on January 24, 1989, at Florida State Prison. His death marked the end of one of the most horrific serial killing sprees in American history. Bundy's legacy lives on as a chilling reminder of the dangers that can lie hidden behind a charming, well-educated exterior. Conclusion: Ted Bundy's legacy. Bundy's story is one of the most chilling in the annals of criminal history. His rise from a seemingly normal young man to a brutal serial killer highlights the dangers of ignoring the darker aspects of human nature. Bundy's ability to manipulate and deceive those around him for so long is a testament to the complexity of his psychopathy. His case has left an indelible mark on the criminal justice system, with many lessons learned about the profile of serial killers and the challenges law enforcement faces in tracking down such dangerous individuals. Bundy's crimes and his ability to charm the public and law enforcement alike serve as a stark warning about the hidden dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of a seemingly normal life. As we look back on Bundy's life and the horrific crimes he committed, we are reminded of the importance of vigilance, the need for justice, and the human cost of ignoring the signs of such monstrous behavior. Part 4. Ted Bundy's Final Confessions and Execution. The end of a monster's reign in Bundy's final days. On death row as Ted Bundy awaited his execution on death row, his remaining days were filled with a mixture of defiance, manipulation, and an eventual acknowledgement of his crimes. Bundy's final moments were under intense scrutiny, not just by law enforcement, but by the media and public alike. His trial had captured the imagination of the American public, and now, as the date of his execution approached, Bundy's psychological profile would be dissected in the media. Many believe that Bundy was just as calculating in his final days as he had been throughout his killing spree on death row. Bundy seemed detached from the emotional toll of the crimes he had committed. He maintained his innocence for a long period of time, refusing to acknowledge his involvement in many of the murders. Bundy's refusal to confess was a powerful manipulation tactic that left investigators frustrated and questioning his motives. It wasn't until just months before his execution that Bundy finally began to confess to the murders. In a shocking turn of events, the confessions were chilling, delivered with the same cold, detached demeanor that Bundy had displayed throughout his killings. He admitted to the murders of more than 30 women, though some believe the true number could be higher. Bundy gave investigators a detailed account of his crimes, describing in vivid detail how he selected his victims, how he stalked them, and how he committed his gruesome murders. It was a confession that confirmed the suspicions of law enforcement officers who had been following Bundy's case for years. Bundy's decision to finally admit his guilt in the final days of his life was seen by some as a desperate attempt to delay his execution, while others viewed it as a final, twisted attempt to control the narrative of his story. Whatever his motivations, Bundy's confessions provided crucial closure for many of the families who had been left in the dark for years about the fate of their loved ones. It also brought a sense of finality to one of the most terrifying serial killer sprees in history. The psychological complexities of Bundy's final confessions were significant, not only because they provided clarity for the victims' families, but also because they revealed the complex nature of Bundy's psychology. While Bundy had been diagnosed with several mental health disorders, including narcissistic personality disorder, his actions and words during his final days suggested a deeper psychological battle. In interviews with law enforcement officials, Bundy displayed moments of coldness and detachment, but also fleeting instances of remorse and regret. His confessions were not ones of heartfelt apology. Instead, they were calculated, as if he were presenting a story of events he could control. Many psychologists who studied Bundy in the years following his capture noted that he seemed to view his crimes more as a personal challenge or test of his intellectual prowess, rather than a series of brutal murders of innocent women. Bundy's inability to show empathy or genuine remorse for his victims was one of the key characteristics that defined his behavior throughout his life. Despite the magnitude of his crimes and the overwhelming evidence against him, Bundy's self-presentation remained largely consistent. A charismatic, manipulative individual with a grandiose sense of self, he often described his killings as though they were a series of experiments or intellectual exercises, rather than acts of violence against human beings. This lack of emotional connection to the horrific nature of his crimes only added to the chilling image of Bundy as a sociopathic killer. In his final interviews before his execution, Bundy discussed the factors that he believed had led him to become a serial killer. He spoke of his upbringing, his relationship with women, and his feelings of powerlessness in the face of his own personal frustrations. Bundy's explanations were complex and often contradictory, leaving investigators and psychologists with more questions than answers. Some experts argued that Bundy's deep-seated hatred of women, stemming from his unresolved issues with his mother, played a major role in shaping his violent tendencies. However, Bundy's confessions also revealed the extent to which he was willing to manipulate the truth to suit his needs. Bundy was known for his ability to lie and deceive, even under pressure, and this continued up until his death. He often provided conflicting details about the murders, some of which were later proven to be false. Bundy's manipulative behavior extended to his final days. As he continued to engage in psychological games with law enforcement and the public, the execution, the end of Ted Bundy's reign of terror after years of legal proceedings, delays, and public intrigue. Ted Bundy's execution was scheduled for January 24, 1989. His case had become a media spectacle, and the public had been following every twist and turn in the saga. Bundy's final moments were carefully orchestrated, with media outlets from across the world setting up outside Florida State Prison to capture his execution. On the day of his execution, Bundy was escorted to the electric chair, his head shaved, and his final meal ordered a rather mundane choice consisting of steak, eggs, hash browns, and coffee. His demeanor was calm, even serene, as he walked to his execution. Bundy's lack of emotional reaction to his own impending death was in line with the persona he had cultivated throughout his life. He had been a man who craved control, and even in his final moments, he sought to maintain a control. In his last moments, Bundy did not show any remorse or offer a final apology. He simply stated that he hoped his death would serve as a cautionary tale, warning others about the consequences of violent behavior. This final statement was seen by many as another attempt by Bundy to manipulate his public image. He had, throughout his life, sought attention and approval, and even at the end, he wanted to be remembered on his own terms. Bundy's execution was carried out by electric chair, a method still used at the time in Florida, as the current surged through his body. Bundy's life was extinguished in a swift and violent manner. His death brought an end to the reign of terror that had plagued the United States for years. Bundy had taken the lives of at least 30 women, and his death provided a sense of closure to many of the families who had been impacted by his heinous actions. The aftermath of Bundy's execution, legacy and cultural impact of Bundy's execution, marked the end of an era in criminal history, but his legacy lived on in the collective memory of America. His case became one of the most studied in the history of criminology, with experts and law enforcement officials attempting to understand the motivations behind his brutal killings. Bundy's ability to deceive, manipulate, and charm those around him was a key factor in his success as a serial killer, and his psychological profile would become a model for understanding the mind of a psychopath. In the years following his execution, Bundy's crimes continued to fascinate the public. His life and murders became the subject of countless books, documentaries, and movies. His case would also serve as a catalyst for discussions on the death penalty, mental health, and the criminal justice system in the United States. For many, Bundy's death was a necessary end to the suffering he had caused, but for others, his execution left unanswered questions. Was Bundy a victim of his circumstances, or was he purely an evil individual beyond redemption? What led him to commit such heinous acts, and could anything have been done to prevent them? Bundy's case also highlighted the flaws in the criminal justice system, particularly in the way serial killers were identified and apprehended. His ability to evade capture for so long, despite numerous red flags and eyewitness reports, demonstrated the difficulties law enforcement faced in catching serial killers during the 1970s and 1980s. Today, Bundy's case is often cited as a pivotal moment in the development of investigative techniques and criminal profiling. In addition to the academic and legal discussions that Bundy's case sparked, his crimes also had a profound effect on popular culture. The idea of the charming psychopath entered the cultural lexicon, and Bundy's name became synonymous with evil and manipulation. His story, though tragic, served as a stark warning about the dangers of superficial appearances and the hidden violence that can lurk beneath the surface. Conclusion: the Ted Bundy legacy. Bundy's story is one of horror, fascination, and tragedy. He was a man who walked among us, blending in with society's norms, but was secretly a monster hiding behind a facade of charm and intelligence. His life and crimes are a chilling reminder of the capacity for evil that can exist in even the most ordinary individuals. While Bundy's execution brought justice to his victims, it also left a lasting legacy that continues to haunt the world. His case has served as a catalyst for change in how law enforcement investigates serial murders, and it continues to be studied as one of the most infamous and troubling criminal cases in history. As we reflect on the life and death of Ted Bundy, we are reminded of the importance of vigilance, the pursuit of justice, and the need to recognize the warning signs of dangerous individuals before they can inflict harm. Ted Bundy's reign of terror may have ended with his execution, but his legacy remains a testament to the darkness that can lurk in the minds of even the most charismatic individuals. His case remains one of the most disturbing chapters in the annals of criminal history, and it continues to serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating the potential for evil in the human psyche. Part 5. Ted Bundy's legacy and the impact on society. Ted Bundy, one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, continues to cast a long shadow over the collective memory of society. His horrific crimes, his charm, and the extensive media coverage of his life and death have created a complex legacy that still fascinates and disturbs people today. While Bundy was executed in 1989, his story is far from over, as his influence permeates various aspects of culture, criminal justice, psychology, and law enforcement. The legacy of Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy's legacy has been shaped by his chilling ability to manipulate both the public and law enforcement. His case remains a landmark in the study of serial killers, with experts analyzing every aspect of his personality, his methods, and his eventual downfall. Bundy's cold-bloodedness, his charm, and the way he evaded capture for so long continue to intrigue criminologists and the public alike. One of the lasting elements of Bundy's legacy is how it has influenced public perceptions of serial killers. Before Bundy, serial killers were often considered to be monstrous figures who operated in complete isolation. Bundy, however, broke that stereotype. He was young, intelligent, attractive, and seemingly well-adjusted. His ability to blend in and be seen as normal made his crimes even more unsettling. It shattered the image of the madman serial killer and introduced the idea that these killers could be anyone, someone you would pass on the street, someone who could charm you, even someone who could be trusted. This led to a significant shift in the way that the public viewed serial killers and their place in society. people started to realize that these criminals weren't always the outcasts of society. They could be well-integrated individuals with family lives, careers, and social standing. This shift in perception had profound implications for the study of criminal psychology and the approach law enforcement took toward hunting down serial offenders. Criminal justice and the Bundy Cassidy investigation into Bundy's crimes marked a turning point for law enforcement. At the time, Bundy's case was a complex one because he was able to move between states with ease, leaving investigators with very little to connect the dots. The methods used by law enforcement to catch Bundy were groundbreaking, especially in the early stages of criminal profiling and forensic investigation. Bundy's case forced law enforcement to look beyond the traditional methods of investigating crimes. It was not just about finding the killer's patterns, but understanding the psychology behind these behaviors. The FBI's behavioral science unit, which was in its infancy during Bundy's killing spree, began to use criminal profiling techniques that would later become standard in investigations into serial crimes. The FBI and local law enforcement worked together to develop a profile of Bundy, and this effort, along with the eventual testimony from Bundy himself, helped them uncover crucial information that led to his capture. Furthermore, Bundy's case demonstrated the need for better communication between states and law enforcement agencies. Before Bundy, there was little collaboration across state lines in criminal investigations. Bundy's ability to cross state lines without raising alarms showed how fragmented law enforcement efforts were. This resulted in the creation of more national databases for missing persons and crime victims, as well as better coordination between police departments in different jurisdictions. Ted Bundy also led to changes in how law enforcement approached serial killings. The realization that a serial killer could blend in with society meant that police officers and investigators had to become more vigilant and more analytical. They couldn't simply rely on profiling or superficial characteristics. They needed to understand the underlying psychology and motivations that drove these killers. This approach has since been used in countless cases, contributing to the capture of other serial killers in the years following Bundy's execution. The psychological legacy of Ted Bundy's case also had a major impact on psychology, particularly in the study of psychopathy and criminal behavior. Bundy was a textbook case for the study of antisocial personality disorder, a condition often associated with serial killers. His ability to charm his victims, manipulate those around him, and remain cool under pressure was a result of his lack of empathy and disregard for others' feelings and well-being. Psychologists and criminologists have used Bundy's case as an example of how psychopathy can manifest in people who are not necessarily immediately recognizable as violent offenders. Bundy was educated, well-spoken, and often well-dressed. He used his charm and good looks to lure women to their deaths, making him a dangerous predator who could easily hide in plain sight. His case has been studied by countless forensic psychologists who have tried to understand the combination of factors psychological, environmental, and situational that made Bundy the monster he became. Moreover, Bundy's ability to articulate his thoughts, including his motivations for killing after his arrest, provided critical insights into the mind of a serial killer. His confessions, though manipulative and self-serving, revealed that he saw his crimes not just as acts of violence, but as a form of empowerment and control. He admitted that the thrill of the kill, combined with the power he felt over his victims, was what motivated him to continue killing. His willingness to discuss his actions with investigators offered invaluable information for those studying serial killers, providing a clearer picture of the twisted logic that fuels such monstrous acts. But Bundy was also a master manipulator. His confessions, often contradictory, revealed the complexities of his psyche. He expressed remorse for some of his victims, while others seemed to amuse him. This behavior has puzzled psychologists for decades, but it has contributed to the development of more effective methods of interviewing and dealing with violent offenders. Bundy's ability to deceive and manipulate even in the face of his inevitable execution taught law enforcement and psychologists the importance of understanding the darker sides of human nature. Bundy's influence on popular culture. Ted Bundy's story has become a cultural phenomenon, with his life, crimes, and eventual capture portrayed in countless films, documentaries, books, and podcasts. His story has fascinated and horrified the public for decades, and it continues to spark discussions on criminal psychology, law enforcement, and society's ability to process such shocking acts of violence. In recent years, Bundy has been the subject of several high-profile documentaries and films, including the 2019 movie Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, which stars Zac Efron as Bundy. These portrayals have helped keep Bundy in the public consciousness and often focus on his charm and his ability to manipulate those around him. The media's portrayal of Bundy has played a significant role in keeping his legacy alive, often blurring the lines between fascination and glorification. Bundy's case has also sparked debates about the ethics of true crime entertainment. While many are captivated by the stories of such notorious criminals, there are concerns about the potential for glamorizing or romanticizing figures like Bundy. This debate has raised important questions about how society should engage with the stories of violent criminals, whether they should be viewed as cautionary tales or as entertainment fodder. Furthermore, Bundy's impact on popular culture is undeniable. His story continues to be used in the context of discussions about serial killers, media ethics, and the nature of evil. Books like The Stranger Beside Me by Rule, which was written by a close friend of Bundy's, delve deeply into his persona and the manipulation he employed. These works continue to be popular decades after his death, proving that Bundy's story remains relevant in discussions about crime and justice. Conclusion: Ted Bundy's dark legacy, Bundy's life, crimes, and death continue to haunt American culture, psychology, law enforcement, and popular media. His legacy is a reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of society, how someone who appears normal, even charming, can harbor such darkness within. His crimes and the way he evaded capture for so long challenged the way law enforcement approached serial killers and helped shape modern criminology. While Bundy is gone, his legacy persists in the way we view criminals, crime prevention, and the importance of understanding the psychology behind violent behavior. His case serves as a chilling reminder that the most dangerous criminals are often the ones who are the hardest to spot. It's a story that will continue to be examined, discussed, and remembered, as it serves as a constant reflection of the complexity of human nature and the terrifying potential for evil. As we reflect on Bundy's legacy, it is important not only to recognize the darkness that he represented, but also the lessons that have been learned through the decades since his capture and execution. The ongoing study of his case and others like it provides insights into the ways we can prevent such crimes from happening again, and how we can better protect vulnerable individuals from those who would do them harm. Call to action CTA. As we continue to examine Ted Bundy's impact on society, it's important to stay informed about the true nature of crime and its lasting effects on both victims and society. If you found this deep dive into Ted Bundy's legacy insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with others who may be interested in understanding the complexities of criminal behavior. Let us know your thoughts on Bundy's legacy in the comments section below. Do you believe media portrayals of serial killers like Bundy glamorize their actions? How do you think society should balance the need for awareness with the potential for sensationalism? Stay tuned for more content on true crime, criminal psychology, and the lessons we can learn from history. Thank you for watching.